On my 20th birthday, in front of relatives who smiled like spectators, my family finally said the quiet part out loud. They only took me in for the money. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I walked out with nothing and disappeared into shelters and borrowed nights. What they didn't know was that leaving that house would set off a chain of events none of them could stop. And it all started with a stranger who found me when I least expected it. Before I tell you everything, take a second to subscribe and comment where you're watching from. Stories like this only matter if someone is listening. On my 20th birthday, I didn't wake up expecting my life to end. I thought maybe there would be a cake this year. Or at least a card that felt less like a receipt. I was wrong. The Mercer house in Plano had always been quiet, but that morning the silence felt staged. Diane Mercer was already dressed, hair pinned perfectly, coffee untouched on the counter. Robert sat at the table, eyes fixed on his phone like it could save him from what was coming. A folder lay between them, thick, neatly aligned, the way Diane liked everything. That should have been my warning. I'd lived in that house since I was 3 months old. Beige walls, beige rules, beige affection. Nothing loud, nothing warm. Just enough care to meet requirements, never enough to ask questions. I didn't know that as a child. I only knew that love felt conditional, and safety felt temporary. Sit down, Evan, Diane said, tapping the folder with one finger. I obeyed. I always had. Now that you're 20, she continued, certain financial arrangements tied to your adoption have officially ended. My stomach tightened. What arrangements? She opened the folder. Inside were spreadsheets. Charts. Numbers highlighted in yellow. The state assistance, she said calmly. The monthly payments we received for taking you in. Robert shifted in his chair but said nothing. I stared at the pages. You're talking about this now? Today? Yes, Diane replied. Because today is when the payments stop. The words didn't register at first. Payments. Stop. She looked up at me then, gray eyes flat and efficient. We only took you in for the money, Evan. And now that income is gone. The room didn't explode. No one shouted. No dramatic gasp. Just the sound of blood rushing in my ears. Someone laughed nervously from the couch. A distant cousin, maybe. They thought it was a joke. It wasn't. You can't be serious, I said. This is my birthday. Robert cleared his throat. It was always understood this was temporary. Temporary. 20 years. Temporary. Diane slid a set of keys across the table. We've already listed the room. You'll need to collect your belongings tonight. My chest burned, but something else took over, something calm and sharp. So that's it? I asked. I was just an investment? Diane didn't flinch. A responsibility. One we fulfilled. I stood slowly. Every eye in the room followed me, curious now, uncomfortable. If that's the truth, I said, my voice steady despite the shaking in my hands, then don't worry. You won't have to pretend I belong here anymore. I didn't wait for permission. I didn't ask where I was supposed to go. I walked out. The door closed behind me without resistance, like it had been waiting for this moment. I sat in my car for an hour before the reality hit. My phone buzzed, family members already rewriting the story, already panicking about appearances. I didn't answer. That night, I slept in my car. The next night, in a shelter in Fort Worth. Then another. And another. I learned quickly how to disappear without vanishing. How to shower with cold water and gratitude. How to keep my clothes clean enough not to draw attention. How to make $20 last longer than it should. Weeks passed. Then months. I stopped counting days and started counting exits. Then one afternoon, sitting on the concrete steps outside the public library, a shadow fell across me. Evan Cole, a man asked. I looked up. Gray suit. Polished shoes. Purpose in the way he stood. Who's asking? I said, already preparing to leave. My name is Lucas Herrera, he replied gently. I've been looking for you. I laughed once. So has everyone else lately. He handed me a card. Heavy stock. Embossed letters. Private investigator. My heart slammed against my ribs. Your biological father hired me, Lucas said. He wanted to find you. The word father felt unreal. Dangerous. Why now? I asked. Lucas hesitated. Just long enough. Because he passed away last week. The ground shifted under me. He left everything to you, Lucas continued. His company. His properties. His entire estate. I shook my head. You've got the wrong person. He didn't blink. Nathaniel Cole never stopped searching for his son. That was the moment everything I thought I knew cracked open. And I had no idea yet how far the truth would go. I didn't answer Lucas right away. My mouth was dry, my thoughts tangled. 3 months earlier, I'd been told I was only worth the money attached to my name. Now a stranger was telling me someone else had spent his life trying to find me. Say it again, I said finally. Slowly. Lucas sat down on the step beside me, not caring about the dust or the curious looks from people passing by. That alone unsettled me. People with expensive suits didn't sit on concrete unless they meant what they were saying. Your biological father's name was Nathaniel Cole, he said. He founded Cole Energy Group. Oil. Infrastructure. International Holdings. He died last week of a heart attack. I laughed, sharp and hollow. You expect me to believe that my real father ran a billion-dollar company while I was sleeping on shelter cots? Lucas nodded. Yes. I shook my head. Then why didn't he come sooner? Lucas reached into his briefcase and pulled out a slim folder. Because he wasn't allowed to. Inside were photocopies. Court filings. Letters. Dates stretching back years. He found you 3 years ago, Lucas said quietly. Tracked your adoption records through a sealed case workaround. He tried to make contact. My breath caught. And the Mercers shut it down immediately. Restraining threats. Legal warnings. Claims that contact would be emotionally destabilizing. The words hit harder than the night they threw me out. They knew. I whispered. Lucas nodded once. They knew someone was looking for you. And they chose not to tell you. The air felt thinner. I pressed my palms into the concrete, grounding myself. He planned to meet you on your 20th birthday, Lucas continued. Once you were fully independent of them. He booked a flight. Made arrangements. Then his heart gave out at his desk. My birthday. The same day I was told I was only taken in for money. I swallowed hard. Why leave everything to me? He didn't even know me. Lucas met my eyes. He didn't need to. We drove to Houston that evening. I rode in silence, watching the city blur past the window. The car smelled like leather and coffee, clean, unfamiliar. I kept expecting someone to stop us, to tell me this was a mistake. No one did. The law office was on the 42nd floor. Glass walls. Polished floors. A woman named Elaine Park greeted me with a calm smile and eyes that looked like they'd seen every version of shock. Evan, she said gently. I'm sorry we're meeting under these circumstances. She placed a sealed envelope in front of me. Your father asked that you open this yourself. Inside was a letter. Handwritten. Uneven, like it had been written in a hurry. My son, if you're reading this, I didn't make it in time. I've spent 20 years trying to find you. Not a day passed where I didn't imagine your face, your voice, your life. I was young when I let you go. Weak. I believed the lie that love could be outsourced. I was wrong. I had to stop. My hands were shaking. I built everything you're about to inherit while looking for you. Every deal, every expansion, every risk, I told myself it was a step closer to you. I'm sorry I failed to reach you while I was alive. I hope what I leave behind proves I never stopped loving you. A small brass key was taped to the bottom of the page. Elaine cleared her throat softly. That key opens a private vault. Your father kept it separate from the estate. He said it was personal. She slid a tablet toward me. Numbers filled the screen. Estate valuation, $97 million. Oil assets. Real estate. 4 properties. 1 private island, Ashfall Key. I stared until the numbers stopped meaning anything. This isn't real, I said. Elaine smiled gently. It is. And it's all yours. The vault was in an industrial district outside Houston. From the outside, it looked ordinary. Inside, it was something else entirely. Walls lined with documents. Photos. Letters. Evidence of a search that never stopped. Age-progressed images of me at 5, 10, 15. Copies of school newsletters. A grainy photo of me standing outside the tire shop where I used to work. He was close, Lucas said quietly. More times than you know. In the center of the room were boxes. Each labeled with a year. Birthday gifts. 20 of them. I opened one at random. Inside was a watch. Another held a book with a note inside. Another, a set of car keys. Then I found the letters. One for every year. Evan, you're 12 today. I hope someone tells you they're proud of you. I am. Evan, 16. I bought you a car. I'll keep it safe until you're ready. I sank to the floor and cried for the first time since the shelter. Later, as we stood in silence, Lucas spoke again. There's something else. He handed me a final folder. Inside were emails. Legal correspondence. The Mercers' names appeared again and again. One message stood out, highlighted. Any further attempts at contact will be considered harassment. Our custody is not influenced by financial incentives. The lie burned. They hadn't just used me. They'd blocked the one person who wanted me without conditions. I closed the folder. And for the first time since my birthday, something cold and steady settled in my chest. They had erased me when the money stopped. They had no idea what they'd awakened. I didn't sleep that night. The guest room at the Houston hotel was larger than the entire shelter floor I'd lived on for months, but the silence inside it was louder than anything I'd known. My mind kept circling the same impossible truth: someone had wanted me. Not for money. Not for appearances. Just because I was his. Nathaniel Cole. My father. I said the word out loud once, just to hear it. It felt strange in my mouth, like a language I was learning too late. By morning, reality pressed in. Lawyers. Calls. Decisions. Elaine Park walked me through documents that felt unreal: shares transferring, authority clauses activating, a signature placing my name at the top of a structure built long before I knew it existed. Cole Energy Group. The board wanted to meet me. Not out of warmth, but necessity. Their founder was gone, and the heir had appeared out of nowhere wearing borrowed clothes and carrying the weight of a life that had just been rewritten. The meeting room was glass and steel. Men and women in tailored suits studied me like an equation they hadn't solved yet. I didn't blame them. I wouldn't have trusted me either. Elaine introduced me calmly. This is Evan Cole. Not Mercer. Cole. The name landed differently. They spoke carefully at first, explaining systems, reassuring themselves more than me. I listened. I asked questions. Real ones. The kind I'd learned to ask growing up when answers were never freely given. By the end of the meeting, something shifted. Not respect yet, but recognition. I wasn't here to play a role. I was here because someone had built this for me. That afternoon, I asked to see Nathaniel's house. It sat outside the city, surrounded by trees, quiet and deliberate. Not a mansion in the flashy sense. A place designed to last. His study was untouched. Papers neatly stacked. Reading glasses folded beside an open book. A faint scent of cologne lingered in the air. I sat in his chair and let the weight of absence settle. He should have been here. Explaining things. Laughing awkwardly. Apologizing in person. Instead, he'd left me a life and 1,000 unanswered questions. Over the next weeks, I learned more about him through others. Assistants. Board members. Old friends. He talked about you constantly, one executive admitted. Every expansion, every risk, he asked if it brought him closer to you. I learned about Ashfall Key. The island he bought when I was 10. A place he imagined us fishing together. About the mansions he never filled. About the scholarships he quietly funded for foster kids, all labeled anonymously. He'd been preparing for me without knowing who I'd become. And then there was the vault. I returned alone one afternoon. I reread letters I hadn't been ready for before. One written the week before he died stopped me cold. If I don't make it, promise me one thing: don't let bitterness define you. Build something better with what I leave behind. I closed the letter and sat there until the room felt smaller. Back in Plano, the Mercers' world was unraveling. I didn't need to interfere. The truth had a way of traveling. Relatives called first. Distant ones. Curious ones. Is it true? We heard something strange. Your name is all over the news. I didn't answer. Then came Diane. Her voicemail was clipped, controlled. Evan, we need to talk. There's been a misunderstanding. Robert texted once. Just my name. Nothing else. I let the phone sit face down. A week later, I returned to Plano. Not for them, but for closure. The house looked smaller. The lawn less perfect. When Diane opened the door, her eyes flicked to my suit, my watch, the car behind me. She smiled tightly. You should have told us. Told you what? I asked. That you were connected. Connected. I stepped inside only long enough to say what needed to be said. You told me I was an arrangement, I said calmly. You treated me like a balance sheet. Now you want a conversation. Robert hovered behind her, thinner somehow. We raised you, he said quietly. That has to count for something. I met his eyes. You housed me. You charged me. You blocked the one person who tried to reach me. Diane's composure cracked for half a second. We did what was practical. And I'm doing what's necessary, I replied. I didn't threaten them. I didn't raise my voice. I walked away again. This time, they knew I wasn't coming back. Over the following months, my life changed faster than I could process. I moved into Nathaniel's house. I took meetings I never imagined attending. I learned the difference between ownership and power. And I learned something else too. Silence unsettles people who are used to control. The Mercers felt it. Neighbors whispered. Old friends avoided them. The image they'd curated cracked under scrutiny they couldn't calculate. I heard later they downsized. Then downsized again. I felt no triumph. Only distance. Ashfall Key became my refuge. I visited alone at first. Walked the shoreline he'd walked in his imagination. Sat on the dock he'd built for someone who never came. I understood then that some losses don't heal. They transform. and transformation was just beginning. Time stopped feeling sharp after that. It softened into something heavier, slower, like wet sand shifting under my feet. Every morning I woke up in a house my father had built while searching for me, and every night I fell asleep knowing he'd never walk through the door to explain it himself. Wealth doesn't cushion that kind of absence. It only amplifies it. The board eased me in carefully. At first, I was an observer, listening, learning, absorbing how decisions rippled outward. Coal Energy Group wasn't just rigs and contracts, it was thousands of lives tied to numbers on screens. I refused to be a name at the top that people whispered about. I sat in meetings until my head hurt. I asked questions that made executives pause. Some tested me, others underestimated me. I let them. I'd learned long ago that patience unsettles people more than confrontation. Nathaniel's office became my anchor. I didn't change it. Not the photos, not the books, not the faint coffee ring on his desk. I worked from there whenever I could, grounding myself in the quiet proof of his existence. Sometimes I caught myself turning to speak, forgetting, just for a second, that he wasn't there. The press circled carefully. Stories appeared that used words like unexpected air and estranged upbringing. None of them captured the truth. They couldn't. The truth wasn't dramatic enough for headlines. It was quieter, colder, more deliberate. One article mentioned the Mercers by name. That's when the calls started again. This time, not just from them. Old neighbors. Former teachers. People who'd watched me grow up and never questioned why I was always alone. Did you really leave with nothing? Were they always like that? I never knew. I didn't correct them. Letting silence answer felt appropriate. Diane called twice in 1 week. The second voicemail shook, not with emotion, but with irritation. We're being treated unfairly, she said. People are making assumptions. We think it would be best if you clarified a few things publicly. I almost laughed. Clarify. She still believed narratives could be managed with the right wording. I didn't call back. Instead, I did something else. I visited the shelter in Fort Worth. I went alone, no cameras, no announcements. The building smelled the same, cleaning chemicals, old fabric, exhaustion. The director recognized me after a moment, eyes widening in disbelief. You don't have to, she began. I know, I said. I want to. I sat with people who looked like I had 3 months earlier. Same guarded eyes. Same quiet calculations. I didn't tell them who I was. I just listened. That night, I made my first decision as myself, not as an heir, not as a symbol. One of the properties Nathaniel left me became transitional housing. Another followed. Then another. No press releases. No naming rights. When the director asked why, I told her the truth. Because I've slept here. And I won't forget it. Word spread quietly. The Mercers heard through someone else. They showed up unannounced one afternoon. I knew before the knock. Something in the air shifts when the past comes calling. Diane stood straighter than I remembered, but her hands betrayed her, tight, restless. Robert looked smaller, older, like gravity had finally claimed him. We need to talk, Diane said. I didn't invite them in. We raised you, Robert said softly. We didn't know. You knew, I replied calmly. You knew someone was looking for me. You knew why. Diane's lips pressed thin. We did what was practical. The word sounded hollow now. You calculated my worth, I said. You were paid for every year I lived under your roof. You don't get to rewrite that. She exhaled sharply. People are treating us like villains. I met her eyes. You don't need me to explain anything. Your choices already did. There was a pause, long enough to feel uncomfortable. Robert spoke again, voice rough. If you could help us out, just a little. There it was. Not remorse. Not apology. Expectation. No, I said. One word. No anger. No hesitation. They left without shouting. Without closure. I watched them walk away, and felt something finally release inside me. Not forgiveness. Not satisfaction. Freedom. Weeks later, I went to Ashfalkey alone. The island was quiet, untouched, exactly as Nathaniel had left it. A small house, stocked with supplies he'd chosen based on guesses about who I might be. Fishing gear. Books. A journal I hadn't opened yet. I sat on the dock at sunset and understood something clearly for the first time. He hadn't built this empire for power. He'd built it as a signal. I wasn't late. I was found. That realization changed how I moved through the world. I began shaping the company differently. Investing differently. Questioning contracts that prioritized speed over impact. Some resisted. Others followed. I wasn't trying to prove anything. I was building something honest. Late one night, back in his study, I opened the journal. The first page read, "If you ever find this, I hope you know I never stopped trying." I closed it gently. The next chapter of my life wasn't about what I inherited. It was about what I chose to do with it. And the final reckoning, quiet, irreversible, was already in motion. The strangest thing about peace is how unfamiliar it feels when you first step into it. For weeks after Ashfall Key, I kept waiting for something to go wrong. A call. A scandal. A revelation that would rip everything open again. Trauma trains you to expect impact. Silence feels like a trick. But life didn't collapse. It steadied. Running the company became less about inheritance and more about stewardship. I learned to trust my instincts, sharpened by years of watching adults who mistook control for care. I listened to engineers who'd been ignored. I questioned advisors who treated profit like a moral compass. Slowly, the culture shifted. Not dramatically. Just enough to matter. Nathaniel's name still carried weight, but people stopped seeing me as a shadow. They started seeing me as deliberate. At night, when the building emptied, I stayed behind. Sometimes in his chair. Sometimes at the window. I talked to him, not out loud, not exactly. More like letting thoughts finish themselves in the space he'd left. I told him about the shelters. About the foundation. About the letters from kids who'd been placed with families who wanted them, not checks. I imagined him listening, smiling in that quiet way Vincent said he had. One letter arrived that undid me. A boy named Marcus. 7 years old. Written in blue crayon, words uneven. They say I'm safe here forever. They put my pictures on the wall. I think that means I belong. I folded the paper carefully and placed it beside Nathaniel's last note. Two truths side by side. Belonging isn't something you earn. It's something someone gives without condition. That realization finally allowed me to look backward without flinching. I drove past the old house one afternoon. Didn't stop. Didn't slow. Just let it exist as a place I'd survived, not a place that defined me. The windows were dark. The lawn uneven. Someone else lived there now. Good. Some places should only be chapters. The Mercers faded from my life entirely after that visit. No more calls. No more attempts. Without leverage, they had nothing to say. I heard through a cousin that they struggled. That the careful math no longer worked. That they blamed me. I didn't correct that either. Blame is lighter than accountability. 1 year after I was found, I stood on Ashfall Key again, this time with people. Vincent. 2 board members I trusted. 3 kids from the foundation who'd never seen the ocean. We grilled fish. We laughed. We let the day stretch without agenda. That night, I finally opened the rest of the journal. Page after page of attempts. Dead ends. Names crossed out. Hope refined, never abandoned. The final entry stopped me cold. If I don't make it, I need you to live freely. Don't let anyone convince you that love must be earned. I sat there long after the others went inside. For the first time, I cried without rage attached to it. Just grief. And gratitude. Years passed. Quietly. Intentionally. The company stabilized. Expanded. The foundation grew faster than expected. We placed dozens of children. We turned away families who asked the wrong questions. We trusted instincts sharpened by lived experience. I changed my name legally. Not to erase the past. To honor the truth. Colton Brennan. Not because of money. Not because of power. Because someone wanted me enough to search for 18 years. On the anniversary of the day Vincent found me, I did something I hadn't planned. I hosted a dinner. Not formal. No speeches. No center tables. Just people who had chosen me. We ate chocolate cake. I laughed when I realized why. At the end of the night, after the last plate was cleared, I stood and spoke, not because I needed to, but because it felt right. I was told once that I was taken in for money, I said. That when the payment stopped, so did the obligation. It took me a long time to understand that love doesn't work on expiration dates. It doesn't calculate return. It doesn't stop searching. I paused, feeling the room hold its breath. Some people keep children. Others love them. I know the difference now. When the night ended, I stood alone at the window again. The city lights glowed steady. Not blinding. Not distant. Just there. I thought about the boy who left a house with a garbage bag and 48 missed calls that came too late. I thought about the man who died holding a plane ticket and a photograph. Neither of them were alone anymore. I whispered the words I'd carried for years. I'm home. And for the first time in my life, the silence answered back, warm, complete, and unafraid. Before I let this story rest, I'll say this once, honestly, if you've ever been made to feel like love had a price, like belonging was conditional, like your presence needed justification, know this. You don't need permission to exist. You don't need to earn care. You don't need to stay where you're only tolerated. Sometimes family isn't where you start. Sometimes it's what you build when you finally walk away. If this story stayed with you, if it made you feel seen, take a moment to share it with someone who might need it too. And if you want to hear more stories like this, about truth surfacing, quiet strength, and lives rebuilt, stay with us. Your presence matters more than you think. I made it home. And I'm not leaving again.